Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. Brought to you by Blue Sky Business Consulting. We discuss 5 questions in about 15 minutes. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. I'm excited to welcome our guest today. This is Joseph Lujan, and he is the founder of Reflective Resonance, and he's out of Dallas, Texas. And Joseph, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. What would you like the audience to know about some of the projects you're working on?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Shawn. So my big project right now is Reflective Resonance. That's my flagship book, my flagship kind of dip into the leadership arena, you might say. So really, I just wanted to kind of take all my notes that I've had from leadership experience, or how I've been led, how I lead now, observations from different areas, different generations, different leadership books. And all of a sudden, it went from writing some notes down to being published on January 7th of this year. So I've really been trying to focus on kind of the reflective series, then working on reflective stewardship, a couple other little avenues there. And a part of that is really focusing on self-awareness, being authentic presence, being grounded and intentional, but all of that focused around the camp out method. So consistency, authenticity, mindfulness, purposeful, optimize, upshift, and transform, and really camping out. And I go through with the book of leadership aspects and perspectives to make yourself better, to make your team better, to make your peers better. And along with that, on the website has corresponding documents that you can really use for, again, yourself, your team, your peers, to really focus on being the best leader that you could be.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I wish you luck in all of that. Obviously, we're like-minded as far as leadership development is concerned. It's very important. So I wish you luck in all that you're doing. Let's go ahead and
Thank
jump
you.
to our questions here. So, Joseph, how can leaders create and foster a psychologically safe environment within their teams and companies?
That's a big question. I feel like there's a lot of different ways that you could do that depending on kind of the culture and the morale that you're working in. I think the biggest thing for me is the behavior itself of the leader.
Mm.
And I think when leaders really show up to be authentically present, to be a little vulnerable in their work, their model of the leadership, their coaching, they and when they respond to mistakes with curiosity instead of blame, then I really believe that's when people begin to feel safe,
Mm.
opening up, speaking, building that comfortable level with your boss, your supervisor, your leader. But it's also about listening, really actively listening, not listening to respond, but learning. There's a lot of knowledge out there about coaching, coaches, leader, and how to really develop that among your team, the conversations you're having, but also acknowledging people's contributions. So I go around nationally and I talk about grace, and huge fan of the entire topic of imposter syndrome. And there's numerous books out there that talk about this, but I really focus on being able to make a mistake in a safe environment
Mhm.
and being okay with that. Obviously, there's a difference between accountability
Sure.
or somebody grace, but I think one thing people often fail at is giving yourself grace. But that starts with your supervisors, your managers showing you that it's okay to do that.
Right. Yeah. Great points. I really like that. Yeah. You're right. Granting ourselves that grace is one of the hardest parts. So that's a good
Sure.
thing. A good reminder for all of us is to be patient with yourself, and then that will set the tone for the rest of the team as well. So great comments. All right. Question number 2. And now, certainly, Joseph, you've had a lot of people that have influenced you throughout your life. As you think about those people, or maybe one person in particular, what's one word that you would use to describe that person?
I would say steady.
Steady.
And
Okay.
yeah, and I've had this a couple times in my career of, we all go through different type of frameworks and leadership styles and how you're managed. And I look back and I really think the best ones that I've had that really impacted my life is a steady leader, somebody that showed up consistently during the good times, the bad times. It gave me a sense of security. And to kind of go back to the first question of that safety, that psychological safety. they made it okay because they themselves were transparent, they were authentic in how they led. A lot of people say, "Oh, I had an open door policy," but often does that actually transpire to be an open door
Right.
policy? My supervisors back in the day, the two that I had in mind, they were very transparent in a lot. And again, it was just very steady. And, like Daniel H. Pink always says, the mastery, purpose, and autonomy. I go into that in my book a little bit and add in that there's also the accountability piece. And
Mhm.
so, really when I think of steady, they gave me all of that because they gave me that autonomy and trust. And in turn, rather than the micromanaging model or the old school way of leading, that made me feel more empowered and I gave a better product at the end of the day, which to me really led to where I'm at now.
I really like that's a great word because you're right. There's a quiet confidence when you're working with a leader that is steady and they're just even keeled. Doesn't mean that they don't have their emotions and their ups and downs, but they're steady and they're reliable. That's a great word. I like that. All right, question number 3. Share some thoughts about how leaders can foster a growth mindset, either in themselves as the leader or across an entire team.
Great question. I think it's looking at how we look at challenges first, instead of seeing them as kind of a threat to our competence, which would make us weak or make us second question things. It would really give them as opportunities to develop. Again, kind of going back to the grace that I just talked about.
Mhm.
But to me, that means being willing to step into discomfort, ask for feedback, of course, recognize that effort is part of the path to the mastery that I also just spoke about.
Mhm.
And for teams, it's about creating an environment where learning is valued. It
Mhm.
needs to be valued. We can't just say, go do that. And if you fail or if something happens, it's a punishment or take you off the project. We need to see these as opportunities, as challenges to really, look inward and reflect. Again, a lot of what I talk about in reflective resonance is really reflecting back on how we can develop others, challenge others. And overall, that kind of means encouraging experimentation, getting a little uncomfortable, recognizing progress. I think that's something these days that it's kind
Yes.
of gone by the wayside. It's checking boxes, saying, okay, next one, next one. It's slowing down of recognizing even the smallest of progress. And sometimes
Right.
that's the motivation somebody needs. And I would really say normalizing the fact that mistakes are part of improvement. It's okay. Obviously, there's going to be times where it's not. For
Right,
the
right.
most part, these mistakes are great learning opportunities. And I've always loved that when I lead in seeing these opportunities, crucial conversations of,
Mhm.
hey, this is awesome. Let's sit down and figure this out together rather than making them feel a certain way or making them feel terrible about that.
Right. Oh, such great comments, Joseph, because there's so much there to this idea of growth and how we create that mindset that growth is good. And we're not just here to kind of run through the little hamster wheel of routines. Sometimes that's necessary, but how else can we create a growth mindset? Great ideas. Great ideas. All right. Question number 4. What ideas do you have on how leaders can manage emotional wellness for themselves?
This is definitely, if you ask this every year from here on out, I feel like it's going to change because there is an ever changing workforce of what that means. I think to me it's something we don't talk about enough, especially in leadership. And I think it's actually more important if ever in
I
leadership
agree.
that that's
Yes.
all trickles down. And if we don't have that up top, then the who's going to be led is going to be led in the wrong way, the negative way, the toxic way. So really the reality is how we manage our emotions, really how we shape the culture, the morale. So my biggest thing that I've really focused on myself for is simply awareness.
Mhm.
Just being aware. Again, that's the whole framework behind reflective resonances, the self-awareness. There's a whole entire chapter on there, and it's something that I think people want to go towards saying, "Oh, it's just self-care. It's go take an hour of meditation or go on a run." But it's so much more than that because
Mhm.
the influence that we have, even you don't need to be a leader to have influence in your workplace, positive or negative.
Right.
And unfortunately, sometimes the negative influence is what travels faster the further, unfortunately. And I think to me, it's taking a moment to recognize the influence you have and pausing, taking a breath, not being reactive. It goes back to the listening that we talked about earlier, and really just resonating in how you're being a leader, because that trickles down.
Yes.
And that presence and that connection is what matters in today's workforce. And of course, that might change any year. We've seen that. I read leadership books a few years ago, and so much has already changed, post COVID, different generations, for a variety of reasons. But really, to me, it's slowing down the awareness and the authentic presence.
I really like that. Yeah, there is a need for all leaders in any situation, and especially emotional wellness, is to be flexible and to recognize, as you said, things are going to change, and to be ready and receptive to that. Really important, because if we get locked into emotional wellness is a formula, it will fail. Eventually, it will fail. But great comments. All right, last question. Tell us a little bit about your first job, maybe a fun story or something.
Um, so my first job, I was a probation officer back in Peoria, Illinois,
Mhm.
and great job. It's it's funny to see how everything has changed over the course of so many years. I kind of fell into that, and the supervisor that brought me in used to babysit me back on the end of the day. And she is actually one of the ones that I talked about earlier in a prior question about how great she was.
Oh
And
yeah.
to see her retire. So it was just a great flow of everything. But the one thing that I always got from that job was work for the job that you want. And it was fun. It was a fun job. The people that I worked with, the stakeholders, it was great. But your first job, make it worth it. That's where you're learning, that's where you should be advancing. Uh, but it was just a great job, and that supervisor really, I think, led to my success here. And it- you know, I don't want to say that that job was a freebie, because it wasn't. It got me here, but I fell to it, and I am just thankful every single day for it.
Well, it's amazing how many guests I've had over the years that have expressed appreciation for that first job, either because it was a foundation that they built on, or they realized this is not the position, the career for me, and that they went completely the other way. So I very much appreciate your learning from that job, and I'm glad that it was a positive experience for you. And what a great story to then be thinking even now about how your leader was so steady and she set that tone for you. So I love that. It's a great kind of a story arc there, but that's great. Joseph,
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking time. I know you're a busy guy and you're doing lots of things, but I really appreciate you jumping on the podcast today. How can people find you and get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can go to reflectiveresonance.org or email me at jdroege1 at gmail.com.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. And thanks to all of you who are watching or listening frequently every week, hopefully. Please continue to subscribe and listen as you'll pick up more ideas on how to be a more effective leader. I'm your host, Shawn Richards. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day. This is Shawn Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. Be sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And for more leadership tips, pick up your copy of Rapid Fire Leadership by going to rapidfireleadership.com, where you can also download free resources to help you in your leadership role. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great day.